You say you're going to win, but you won't win through noise, through force, or through pretending to be something you're not. You will win because something ancient in you has already decided not to die unknown. You will win because there's a battle raging in your soul that you've finally stopped ignoring. This is not about external success. It's about internal alignment. Stay with me, because by the end of this, you won't just want to win. You'll remember why you must. You believe that you are making decisions. But until you have brought the unconscious into awareness, it is not you who decides it. Is your conditioning, your habits, your fears, your wounds, and these hidden forces, so easily dismissed, orchestrate the very direction of your life. You might call it fate. You might call it bad luck. But deep down, it is the part of yourself you have not yet seen that is writing your story. And unless you are willing to stop, reflect, and make that which is hidden conscious, you will repeat the same cycles under new disguises, new jobs, new partners, new opportunities that strangely feel like old failures. You don't need more motivation, you need illumination. And that begins with the terrifying but liberating truth. Your unconscious is not neutral. It is alive. It is intelligent. And it is waiting for you to take responsibility for its contents. Every reaction you don't understand, every self-sabotaging pattern, every emotional trigger that seems to explode without reason, these are not random. They are the language of the unconscious, trying to get your attention. You say you want to win, but have you truly examined the silent patterns within you that are built to lose? Have you looked at the inner voices that whispered just loud enough to hold you back? Until you do, you will forever be at war with yourself. To bring the unconscious into the light is to disturb the false peace of ignorance. It is to risk the shattering of the illusion that you are always right, always in control, always the victim of external circumstances. But within this disturbance lies the seed of real transformation. It is the difference between living your life blindly and walking it awake. When you begin to face the unconscious, you do not gain comfort, you gain clarity. And with clarity comes power, not the power to dominate others, but the power to stand rooted in truth, while the world around you sways with illusion. But here is the paradox. Within that unconscious, buried beneath layers of repression and shame, you will find not only your most dangerous impulses but also your deepest wisdom, your capacity to love, your intuitive knowing, your creative fire. What has been hidden from you has not only been your suffering, but your potential. And this potential cannot be accessed by bypassing the darkness. It must be reached through it. That is why you cannot simply chase after light. You must turn toward the shadow. You must be willing to go into the cave of your own psyche and retrieve what you once abandoned there. And yes, it will feel like a death because it is the death of who you thought you were. The enemy is not out there. It has always been closer under your skin, in your thoughts, in your that subtle self-loathing that disguises itself as humility, that unconscious sabotage that masks itself as prudence, that inner whisper that says, maybe I don't deserve this. You want to be free, but you are still protecting the very voice that enslaves you. You do not need to fight it. You need to understand it. The moment you turn and listen, truly listen, to the parts of you you've rejected, you will begin to transmute them. You will begin to win not through violence, but through integration. Do you understand what it means to face your shadow? It is not a spiritual metaphor. It is the moment you sit with your rage instead of projecting it. It is the moment you allow your grief to speak instead of numbing it. It is when you own your envy, your desire to control, your fear of being seen. As weekend, you say, this too is part of me. Not to justify it, not to indulge it, but to take back what has been split off. You cannot heal what you refuse to acknowledge. You cannot win against an enemy you pretend does not exist. But when you face it not with shame, but with radical honesty, you begin to disarm it. And as you do, you will find something strange happening. The inner war begins to quiet. Not because you've eradicated the darkness, but because you've stopped running from it. You've stopped giving it more power by pretending it isn't there. You have begun to reclaim your own psychic territory. And in this space, something new emerges. Not perfection, but wholeness. Not idealism, but authenticity. And from this wholeness comes a strength that does not need to shout. A strength that does not tremble when others doubt you. A strength that knows not because it was taught, but because it was remembered. You see, you do not become whole by polishing your image. You become whole by telling the truth to yourself first. By admitting that you have played roles to be accepted, that you have hidden desires to be loved, that you have betrayed yourself to avoid rejection. And then, by slowly shedding those masks, not all at once, not in dramatic rebellion, but in quiet moments of courage, when you choose to act from your real self instead of the character you learned to perform. We were never meant to be perfect. We were meant to be real. And reality includes contradiction. It includes longing and fear, confidence and doubt. When you can hold all of these together, without collapsing into either pride or despair, then you have begun to walk the path of individuation. You are no longer a fragment. You are a whole. And the world begins to respond differently to you, not because it has changed, but because you have. You are no longer seeking approval from the outside, because you have found something more enduring within. Victory, then, is not the absence of struggle. It is the presence of self. It is the refusal to betray your truth for acceptance. It is the choice to be who you are, even when it costs you comfort, certainty, or companionship. It is a kind of inner sovereignty, and it cannot be borrowed, bought, or begged for. It must be forged through fire. Through countless moments of choosing to remain awake when it would be easier to numb. Through the willingness to carry your own cross, your history, your pain, your longing, and to carry it not as a burden, but as a badge of becoming. The truth is, every single thing you think disqualifies you from winning the insecurity, the fear, the past mistakes is exactly what qualifies you, if you are willing to work with it consciously. Your wounds are not obstacles. They are instructions. They are invitations to turn inward and recover the parts of you that fractured under pressure. And when you begin to recover them, you recover yourself. The one who existed before the world told you who to be. And the most astonishing thing is this: you don't need to add anything to yourself to become whole. You only need to remember. To remember who you were before shame was introduced. To remember the wisdom of your childhood instincts, the fire of your untamed imagination, the clarity that came before the masks. And this remembering is not nostalgic, it is revolutionary. It is the act of returning to the original blueprint of your soul and allowing it to express itself without censorship. What you're really seeking is not external success, is internal alignment. It is the congruence between what you feel, what you believe, and how you act. And this alignment creates a kind of power that is not dependent on outcomes. You may win or lose by the world's standards, but inwardly you are unshaken, because your sense of worth is no longer tied to performance. It is rooted in being. And that is the kind of winning that cannot be undone. It is not a temporary high. It is not applause that fades. It is a quiet knowing that remains even in the dark, especially in the dark, because the one who has faced the unconscious, who has embraced the shadow, who has walked through the fire and emerged still willing to love, to grow, to speak the truth, that one cannot be defeated. Not really, because that one has already won the only battle that matters, the battle to reclaim the self. You tell yourself that you are avoiding suffering, that if you stay still long enough, if you remain quiet, unnoticed, untouched, that life might pass you by without asking too much of you. But you misunderstand the nature of suffering. The suffering you are avoiding does not disappear, it accumulates. It builds in your body, in your mind, in your soul, until one day you cannot tell whether you are living or merely surviving. The irony is that the very struggle you resist contains the key to your transformation. What you call hardship is often the gate to a deeper strength, a truer self, a more complete existence. But it only becomes that if you walk through it willingly. There is something in you that already knows this, something ancient that trembles not in fear, but in recognition. You sense, perhaps dimly, that what frightens you most has something to teach you, that the task you dread is the one that would free you. But this knowing has been buried beneath layers of cultural conditioning, emotional avoidance, and intellectual rationalization. You've been taught to pursue ease, to seek comfort, to measure success by the absence of conflict. But the soul is not interested in comfort, it is interested in growth. And growth only occurs when the structure is challenged, when the old self is asked to die, so that something more real can be born. The path of least resistance is rarely the path of individuation. What is easy is often deceptive. What is difficult, what demands your full attention, your surrender, your confrontation with your own limitations. What makes you you. You do not have to seek pain, but you must stop running from it. For it is in the moments of greatest friction that your latent potential begins to awaken. This is not romantic suffering. This is transformative suffering. It is the kind of experience that brings you to your knees, not to punish you, but to show you what lies beneath the persona, beyond the mask. If you resist it, you remain fragmented. If you face it, you begin to integrate. That is why the struggle is sacred. Not because it feels good, but because it strips away everything false. It exposes what is fragile, what is immature, what is still asleep within you. It reveals where you are out of alignment with your own soul. And in this exposure, there is a brutal kind of grace. You learn what must die for you to truly live. The ego calls this failure. The soul calls it initiation. But this initiation cannot be outsourced. No one else can do it for you. No amount of intellectual understanding can substitute for the lived experience of confronting your inner chaos. This is why so many remain stuck. They read, they learn, they philosophize, but they never descend. They avoid the inner fire because they fear it will destroy them. And it will, but only the false self, the mask, the persona. What remains, what survives the flames, is the gold. The solid self. The one who does not need to prove, to pretend, to perform. You think you are being punished when things fall apart. You think life is unfair when you are forced to face your deepest wounds. But what if, instead, this is life trying to get your attention? What if the very collapse you fear is the sacred breaking open of the shell around your soul? The shell that once protected you, but now suffocates you. In that collapse, you meet yourself. Not the self you show to the world, but the one you abandoned to be accepted. That self has waited quietly for years, perhaps decades, for you to turn around and remember. And as you begin to remember, as you begin to walk into the fire, instead of away from it, something profound happens. The outer world changes, not because it has transformed, but because your inner state is no longer in conflict. When you are at war within, you see the world through the lens of that war. You project your pain onto others. You find enemies in every shadow. You misinterpret silence as rejection, criticism as betrayal, uncertainty as failure. But as you bring order to your internal world, the projections fall away. The chaos outside begins to quiet. Not completely, but enough for you to see clearly. This is the great secret of the psyche. The world is your mirror. It shows you what you believe, what you fear, what you have disowned. Every trigger is a teacher. Every conflict is an invitation. And the moment you take full ownership of your projections, you reclaim immense power. No longer are you a victim of circumstances. You become the author of your response, the sculptor of your character, the architect of your inner landscape. This is not easy work. It is deeply uncomfortable to realize how much of what you see out there is actually rooted in here. It is humbling to accept that the very people who frustrate you may be reflecting the parts of yourself you haven't accepted. But this humility is the foundation of transformation. It is what allows you to stop blaming, to stop avoiding, to stop numbing and instead begin the slow, steady work of reintegration. As you reintegrate, you also begin to see through the persona, not just your own, but everyone's. The mask that once felt necessary begins to fall away. You no longer need to appear perfect, strong, certain. You no longer feel the need to be liked by everyone, to impress, to achieve for the sake of validation. The persona loses its grip, and something far more powerful emerges. The authentic self. The authentic self does not strive, it expresses. It does not perform, it radiates. It is not concerned with appearances, is grounded in truth. And when you begin to live from this place, your life becomes aligned. Aligned not with external expectations, but with your internal compass, with your values, your vision, your purpose. This alignment creates coherence. And coherence creates strength. Strength not as dominance, but as presence. Strength as the ability to remain whole in a fractured world. Strength as the quiet confidence that comes from knowing who you are and what you stand for. This is the kind of winning that is not measured by applause or recognition, but by the peace that comes from living without betrayal of the self. But to live without betrayal of the self, you must first know who that self is. Not the one shaped by trauma, by fear, by the desperate hunger for approval, but the one that existed before all of that. The one that remains untouched beneath the layers. To return to that self is the work of a lifetime. It is not linear. It is not clean. But it is essential. And in that return, you discover a shocking truth. You do not need to become someone else to win. You only need to remember who you are. Strip away the conditioning, the expectations, the lies. What is left is pure. And from that purity arises a power that does not need to chase, to grasp, to prove. It simply is. This isness, this being, is what the soul longs for. To live from a place of fullness rather than lack. To act from a place of inspiration rather than fear. To give from a place of abundance rather than scarcity. And this is not just possible, it is your natural state. It is the state you return to when you stop running, stop performing, Stop abandoning yourself for the sake of survival. You were not meant to be a mask. You were not meant to be a function, a role, a product of expectation. You were meant to be a force, unique, creative, whole. And when you remember that, when you live from that place, you do not need to compete. You do not need to prove. You can simply exist as you are. And the world begins to rearrange itself in response. There is something in you that the world has not yet seen. Not because it is not there, but because you have not yet trusted it enough to bring it forward. That part of you is not loud. It does not scream for attention, but it is steady, it is sacred, and it is waiting for your permission to lead. It cannot lead while the persona is in charge. It cannot speak when you are consumed by the need to fit in, to be liked, to win according to someone else's rules. But the moment you quiet the noise, the moment you stop chasing and start listening, you will hear it. The true voice. The one that whispers, not what you should do, but what you were born to do. This is not a fantasy. It is your responsibility. The world needs you, not the edited version, not the marketable version, but the real you. The one who remembers. The one who walks into the fire willingly. The one who does not turn away from the shadow, but welcomes it as part of the whole. The one who knows that winning is not about having more, but about being more.